The doctor put him aside, his expression grave. He asked him if he had ever suffered from a genetic illness in his childhood or in his youth. He was unable to recall, so he called his mother to ask. She confirmed that he had indeed been seriously ill as a child. The doctor's face grew even more serious as he delivered the news. The illness had recurred, and more importantly, it meant that he had likely been infertile his entire adult life. In a small, quiet village nestled among rolling hills and lush green fields, there lived a poor couple named John and Mary. Despite their humble circumstances, they were deeply in love and dreamt of starting a life family together. Their modest home, a small cottage with a thatched roof, was filled with warmth and hope for the future. One day, Mary discovered she was pregnant. The news brought immense joy to the couple, and they spent countless evenings discussing their plans for their growing family. As the months passed, Mary's belly swelled, and they learned they were expecting twins. The entire village celebrated the news, offering support and well wishes to the expectant parents. However, as Mary's due date approached, complications arose. Her pregnancy became high risk, and the local midwives advised them to seek medical care in the city. John, worried for his wife and unborn children, borrowed money from neighbors and relatives to finance the journey and hospital stay. With heavy hearts but hope in their eyes, John and Mary said goodbye to their village and embarked on the long journey to the city. The bumpy ride in an old rickety bus was uncomfortable for Mary, but she endured it bravely, knowing it was for the sake of their babies. Upon arriving at the city hospital, Mary was immediately admitted. The stark white walls and antiseptic smell were a far cry from the cozy warmth of their village home. John, feeling out of place in the bustling city hospital, reluctantly left Mary in the care of the doctors and nurses. He had to return to the village to work and save more money for their hospital bills. Days turned into weeks, and Mary's condition worsened. The doctors grew increasingly concerned about the health of both mother and babies. Finally, the day of delivery arrived. It was a long and difficult labor with numerous complications. The medical team worked tirelessly to ensure the safety of Mary and her twins. After hours of intense struggle, Mary gave birth to 2 beautiful baby girls. However, the ordeal had taken its toll on her body. She lost a significant amount of blood during the delivery and fell into unconsciousness. The doctors managed to stabilize her condition, but she remained in a coma-like state for several weeks. During this time, the newborn twins were cared for by the hospital nursing staff. Most of the nurses were kind and attentive, ensuring the babies received the best care possible. However, among them was a nurse named Linda, whose heart had been hardened by years of witnessing suffering and her own unfulfilled desires. Linda had long harbored a secret. She had been approached by a wealthy woman named Sarah, who was desperate for a child. Sarah had been unable to conceive and had resorted to extreme measures to fulfill her dream of motherhood. She had even gone so far as to fake a pregnancy, putting her husband and everyone around her. When Linda saw the unconscious Mary and her newborn twins, she saw an opportunity. She contacted Sarah, informing her that there was a baby available, one that could be hers if she acted quickly. Sarah, blinded by her desire for a child, agreed without hesitation. Sarah had carefully planned her deception. She had avoided intimate contact with her husband. Throughout her fake pregnancy, always finding excuses to keep him at arm's length. Now with Linda's call, she saw her chance to complete her elaborate ruse. Waiting for a time when Tom was out of town on an important business trip, Sarah put her plan into action. She called Tom, feigning distress and claiming she had gone into early labor. Tom, worried and conflicted, wanted to return immediately, but Sarah insisted that her mother would take care of her. She emphasized the importance of his meeting, assuring him that everything would be fine. Reluctantly, Tom agreed to stay for his meeting, his mind filled with concern for his wife and unborn child. Meanwhile, Sarah rushed to the hospital to meet Linda and collect the baby she had been promised. The transaction was quick and discreet. Linda handed over one of Mary's twin girls, and Sarah paid her handsomely for her silence. With a newborn in her arms, Sarah hurried home, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. By the time Tom returned from his trip, Sarah had already settled in at home with a baby. She presented the child to him as their own, and Tom was overcome with joy and emotion. He marveled at the tiny fingers and toes, the soft wisps of hair, and the innocent eyes looking up at him. Sarah continued her web of lies, told Tom that she wasn't producing enough milk and that they would need a bottle to feed the baby. Tom, none the wiser, supported that decision, wanting only the best for his new family. Back at the hospital, Linda pocketed her ill-gotten gains, pushing aside any feelings of guilt. She convinced herself that she had done a good deed, providing a loving home for a child who might otherwise have grown up in poverty. Weeks passed, and Mary finally regained consciousness. Weak and disoriented, she was devastated to learn that one of her precious twins had allegedly died. The hospital staff, following Linda's obligated story, informed Mary that due to her extended unconsciousness and the fact that she had remained in the city alone, they had been forced to bury the deceased twin. Mary was heartbroken. She clung to her remaining daughter, grateful for the child she still had, but mourning the loss of the other. As soon as she was strong enough to travel, she returned to her village with her baby. The entire village turned out to welcome Mary and John's child. There was a bittersweet atmosphere as they celebrated the new life while also grieving the loss of the other twin. John, who had been working tirelessly in the fields to pay off their debts, was overjoyed to have his wife and daughter home, but saddened by the loss they had suffered. They named their daughter Emily, and she quickly became the light of their lives. As Emily grew, she blossomed into a beautiful and vibrant little girl. Her laughter echoed through their cottage, bringing joy to everyone around her. Meanwhile, in the city, Sarah and Tom doted on their daughter, whom they had named Olivia. The little girl grew into a pretty and charming child, the spitting image of Emily. Though neither family knew of the other's existence, Sarah and Tom's home was filled with happiness, but Sarah lived with a constant fear that her secret would be discovered. Sarah often lay awake at night, torn between her love for Olivia and the guilt of her deception. She justified her actions by focusing on the love and opportunity she could provide for the child. Still, she lived in fear of the day her carefully constructed lie might unravel. As the years passed, life in the village became increasingly difficult for John and Mary. With mouths to feed and limited opportunities, John made the difficult decision to seek work in the city. He promised Mary that it would only be temporary, just long enough to save money for a better life for their family. With a heavy heart, John left for the city, carrying with him the hopes and dreams of his family. The city was a maze of towering buildings and bustling streets, a stark contrast to the quiet village life he was accustomed to. After days of searching, John finally found employment as a company driver for a wealthy businessman, none other than Tom, Sarah's husband. John proved to be a hardworking and reliable employee. He worked long hours, often going above and beyond his duties. Tom appreciated John's dedication and soon came to rely on him, not just as a driver, but as a trusted employee. Every month, John diligently sent money back to Mary and Emily in the village. He lived frugally, saving every penny he could. In his letters home, he painted a picture of hope, assuring Mary that soon they would all be together in the city, living a better life. As John's savings grew and so did his family, Mary gave birth to a son, whom they named Michael. John's heart ached to be with his family, to hold his new son and to see how much Emily had grown. He redoubled his efforts, working even harder to make his dream of reuniting with his family a reality. Finally, after years of sacrifice and hard work, John had saved enough money to bring his family to the city. He rented a small but comfortable apartment in a modest neighborhood and sent for Mary, Emily, and Michael. The day of their arrival was one of pure joy. Emily, now 6 years old, marveled at the tall buildings and bright lights of the city. Michael, a curious 3-year-old, clung to his mother's hand, overwhelmed by the new sights and sounds. Mary's eyes shone with pride as she saw the life John had worked so hard to provide for them. John enrolled Emily in a nearby school, determined to give her the education he never had. The little girl quickly adapted to city life, making new friends and excelling in her studies. Michael, too, thrived in their new environment, his playful nature bringing laughter to their small apartment. Life seemed to be looking up for John and his family. He continued to work hard for Tom, grateful for the opportunity that had allowed him to reunite his family. Little did he know that the fate had set in motion a series of events that would soon turn their lives upside down. One day, Tom fell ill at work. Pale and visibly unwell, he asked John to drive him to the hospital. John, concerned for his employer's health, readily agreed. At the hospital, the doctor ran several tests, his brow furrowing as he examined the results. The doctor put Tom aside, his expression grave. He asked Tom if he had ever suffered from a genetic illness in his youth. Tom, unable to recall, called his mother to ask. She confirmed that he had indeed been seriously ill as a child. The doctor's face grew even more serious as he delivered the news. The illness had recurred, and more importantly, it meant that Tom had likely been infertile his entire adult life. Tom was stunned, his mind raced, thinking of Olivia, the daughter he loved more than life itself. How could this be possible if he couldn't father children? He shared his confusion with the doctor, who recommended a fertility test to confirm the diagnosis. As Tom left the hospital, his mind was a whirlwind of questions and doubts. He offered to drive John home, needing a distraction of the familiar roads to clear his head. John protested, concerned for his boss's health, but Tom insisted. When they arrived at John's apartment building, two children came running out to greet him. Tom watched in shock as the little girl, the spitting image of his own daughter, ran towards the car. For a moment he thought it was Olivia, but as the girl drew closer, he noticed subtle differences. The girl ran straight past Tom, throwing her arms around John. Tom watched in disbelief as John hugged both children, the love between them evident. Tom felt as if he was in a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. He rubbed his eyes, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Tom bid a hasty goodbye to John and drove away. His mind reeling, he found himself at a nearby park, needing a quiet place to think. As he sat on a bench, trying to process everything that had happened, a small boy rode towards him, followed by a toddler. The little boy, no more than 2 years old, smiled up at Tom as he reached for his bow. A woman's voice called out as Tom looked up. He found himself face to face with his ex-wife, Emma. Emma stopped short when she saw Tom, surprise evident on her face. They exchanged awkward greetings, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Emma introduced the little boy as her son, and Tom's confusion deepened. As they talked, a man approached, calling out to Emma and the boy. The child squealed, "Papa!" and ran to the man, who scooped him up with a loving smile. Emma excused herself, explaining that her husband had come to pick them up. Tom watched as Emma walked away with her new family, feeling as if the ground had been pulled out of under him. How was it possible that Emma, who had been unable to conceive during their marriage, now had a child? The realization hit him like a physical blow. The fertility issues had been his all along. Tears welled up in his eyes as the full weight of his actions crashed down upon him. He remembered how he had allowed his mother to mistreat Emma, how he had betrayed her and his secretary, Sarah. He had cruelly thrown Emma out of his life, mocking her for her supposed inability to have children. The memories flooded back. Emma begging him to get checked, insisting that her own tests had come back normal. But she had been too proud, too certain that the problem couldn't possibly be with him. Sarah had played on his desires, lying about a pregnancy to drive the final wedge between him and Emma. Tom's mind raced, connecting the dots. Sarah's insistence on marriage, the convenient miscarriage shortly after their wedding, the years of failed attempts to conceive, and then suddenly, Olivia. It all made a horrible kind of sense now. Feeling physically ill, Tom drove home. He found Sarah and Olivia in the living room, the little girl running to greet him with open arms. Tom hugged her tightly, his heart breaking with the realization that she might not be his biological daughter. Over the next few days, Tom observed his family closely, his mind churning with questions and suspicions. He noticed little things he had overlooked before. How Olivia didn't quite have his eyes or Sarah's nose. He found himself staring at John's daughter Emily, marveling at her uncanny resemblance to Olivia. Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Tom called John into his office. He asked pointed questions about Emily, her age, where she was born, the circumstances of her birth. John, puzzled by his boss's sudden interest in his family, answered honestly, unaware of the impact his words were having. When John mentioned the hospital where Emily was born, the same hospital where Olivia had allegedly been born, Tom felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. He pressed for more details, and John shared the story of Mary's complicated pregnancy, the twin birth, and the tragic loss of one baby. Tom dismissed John, his mind racing. He knew what he had to do next. He drove to the hospital, determined to uncover the truth. At the administration office, he requested Olivia's birth records, only to find that they didn't exist under Sarah's name. Desperate for answers, Tom gave them John's wife's name, Mary. To his shock, her records appeared showing the birth of twins. The administrator, sensing something amiss, called in the nurse who had been on duty that day. The moment Tom saw the nurse, he recognized her. It was Linda, the same nurse who had helped Sarah in the early days after bringing Olivia home. Linda, seeing Tom, began to tremble, realizing that her long-buried secret was about to come to light. Well, besties, this is the end of part 1. What do you think happened next? Is the nurse going to spill the beans knowing the consequences? Should Tom pursue this matter further? Should he confront his wife about Olivia? Well, look out for part 2 and you shall know what happened next. See you in the next video. Bye.